Hello and welcome to Filibusters in Fine Print, where AMGA's public policy team gives you the insider view on healthcare regulations and legislation. Thanks so much for joining us for the latest from Washington, D.C.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to AMJ's Filibuster and Fine Print podcast. We have AMJ public policy experts talking about the big issues of the day. All the policy news that's fit to print or to talk about, I guess. Then we have Daryl Drevna
What's happening?
and Lauren Latney.
Hi, it's good to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you all. And we are going to talk about some sort of non-legislative things today. We have a confirmation hearing that happened yesterday and going on today. And we also have some executive orders to talk about. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to define what executive order is and what it does. Let's talk confirmation first. Daryl,
Great.
who's on the hot seat?
Yeah, we've got RFK Jr. sitting in front of the Senate Finance Committee the other day and trying to explain what his vision is, I think, to help make America healthy again.
Baja.
Baja, yeah. So Baja Fresh. I don't know. Yeah. But it's really interesting to see just him to try to articulate what it is he wants to accomplish in HHS. And Lauren and I were talking about this. I was like, is this actually the right fit for him? Is this really the department that's suited or designed to accomplish what apparently it is that he wants to do?
Yeah, I don't think he realized he applied to the wrong job. I think he went through the interview, he thought everything was fine, and then when they gave him his, here's what you actually do, he's like, I'm not going to do that. Like, what are you talking about? I thought I was going to do this job. And you could tell just based on a lot of his commentary about healthy foods, preservatives, how do we take care of the soil? All of those are agriculture. You know, our nation's food programs, SNAP, all of those things go through Department of Ag. And it's also interesting that there were several members of Congress who are from the Midwest who made comments that were environmental ag related. When it came to cattle, when it came to things like that. And so I was coming out confused because I was like, I thought this was a healthcare hearing. And so I think I'm curious about how RFK Jr. is going to operate at HHS when his true love and desire is more ag based.
Yeah,
and FDA based.
It's like you're in the office down the hall and you keep walking down to see what's going on with the job you really want. But that said, he's gonna walk into that office and have to deal with the largest healthcare programs in the country through Medicare and Medicaid.
1.7 trillion a year.
No, it's just it's almost an unfathomable number. And there was a lot of discussion about Medicaid and what they want to do with that potentially. And this comes up every couple of years when there's a Republican office. Is they're talking about letting the states experiment. The laboratory democracy. We're going to let the states, and I think governors love to hear this, right? All of a sudden, they're going to have more control over how they get to spend the Medicaid dollars flowing into their states. But in my mind, as soon as you start talking about letting the states experiment and giving them more control in the context of Medicaid, that means block grants in my mind. And we've been down that road. There's always policy papers or legislation that goes down that road. And typically, it fizzles out unless you want to go through the waiver process. But to Lauren's point, that's a complicated thing to navigate if you're really focused on agriculture policy.
Sorry, right. And I'm also thinking about when we talk about block grants, there was just a hearing just last year in Energy and Commerce that looked at misuse of state funds in Mississippi, where it was basically Medicaid dollars, which were block granted, was used as slush fund for building a new gym, for doing anything that was not the purpose of the money. And Brett Favre got pulled into it.
Brett Favre.
Yeah, and had to testify, and there was a little bit of a muddled conclusion to that. But I think it also kind of makes me really interested in this sort of continued need for block granting when we've already seen integrity problems in the program.
Yeah, so I mean, if they back away from that, which I expect that they would, assuming he gets confirmed, there's still a lot you can do to have the states experiment, but that's getting into the waiver process. The joke or the little cliche saying is, if you've seen one Medicaid program, you've seen one Medicaid program, and then you've got every congressional delegation is going to get involved, every governor's getting involved, and they can do a lot with premiums. They can do a lot with the expansion population in Medicaid.
Mhm.
So it'll be really interesting to see what sort of approach an HHS under RFK Jr. would take to sort of experiment with the Medicaid program.
Okay. So did he touch on Medicaid at all? And so it sounds like he talked about block grants. Is that fair to say? Or conceptually, he had a concept of a plan? Is that what we're
I don't
thinking
think
about?
he knew. Well, in order to have a concept of plan, you have to have definitions first.
Mhm.
And it was clear throughout the hearing that he does not understand the difference between Medicare and Medicaid.
Okay, is that important?
It's
Is that a big deal?
it's kind of a big deal.
Okay.
They're two. It's hard. When you see that in some of the pushback, the reactions like he doesn't need to know the minutia of the programs. He's the vision guy. But that said, this isn't
Needs to know what
he
the
needs to know what
programs
the
are.
programs are.
Yeah.
Okay,
right?
so that's a big deal.
So as someone who spends his entire career in the minutia, it's really hard
Or that
to
be you.
hear that. Yeah.
Yes.
But
The fine
that's
print.
the fine print.
Yes.
The fine print. But I think if you look at the reaction to the hearing, his defenders will say, like I said, he's the vision guy, and Daryl, you're just an establishment, a policy guy, and you're the problem, right? And you're the type who we're going to work around to implement this Make America Healthy Again, because it's the entrenched interests that are holding us back. I think you saw some of that come across in the hearing yesterday.
Yes, but it was also interesting just from the question standpoint, outside of the ones that were ag related, is how deeply personal these issues are for these senators. And it's not just like concern about the impact on their district. Newly selected Senator Raphael Warnock made his appearance for the first time in Senate Finance, and he focused a lot of questions on CDC. CDCs were located in Atlanta, and what will happen to the impact of Atlanta jobs. But you also saw people talk about his previous statements, which he disavowed, and was also interested that they were like, "Oh, you said this," and then he's like, "I didn't say that," and they're like, "I'm going to submit for the record the exact quote that you said about it." So he was getting caught up. But to go back to the personal part, there was a member of Congress, and I'm sorry if I can't remember her name, who has talked about her mental health journey and has used antidepressants, antipsychotics in order to deal with her depression. So it was very much a feeling of anger toward JFK Jr. in terms of his previous statements about antidepressants. And so there was a lot of hurt there. And that emotion is going to be curious about when you start doing policy at HHS. How much these senators are going to look at every single detail of what you do because of their fear that some of these things will get extraordinarily destabilized.
Interesting. So Daryl, you're an HHS veteran,
Yeah.
and as am I. What are there, 44,000 employees there?
Give or take, yeah, it's a
like that.
huge organization.
So when we talk about things like vaccine, and he's made some incredible statements around vaccinations and vaccines generally, other things. Assuming he is even confirmed, it is hard to move that bureaucracy around. I mean, we are resistant to that sort of thing when we're at HHS. So do we think he can make huge changes around vaccines or anything? With 44,000 people maybe not in alignment.
So I think,
with him?
if you take a further step back, I think it's going to be very difficult for him to get the career staff on board with these sorts of changes we're talking about. And then not only his past statements and, corrections, revisions for the record and that sort of thing on what he's saying now.
Revise and extend my remarks.
Thank you. Yeah, revising and extending his remarks on vaccination. In the context of, on day one of the Trump administration, you've got these executive orders flying around, which are, these executive orders essentially are the administration's view on how they're going to interpret, various aspects of the law, or, direct orders on how agency and department and civil servants are going to act. So
Mhm.
day one, it was there's this communications hold, there's this regulatory hold.
Right.
So we're going to shut everything down till we get our people in place and we have a chance to review these things. So that if I'm sitting in my cube in Security Boulevard where CMS is, or if I'm over in the Humphrey Building and all of a sudden I've got this directive where I can't talk to my colleagues in other departments or other organizations and I'm not allowed to do anything, it's just this, it puts people on edge, right?
Okay.
It just makes it's an aggressive move, I think, coming out of the bat, out of the box. So that just sort of sets the tone for your working relationship with the career civil servants who are there.
Mhm.
Um,
There are two things that were also interesting that came up in the hearing. Number one, Senator Elizabeth Warren asked about RFK Jr.'s in the investments. And while he has done the sort of what I actually have to do bare minimum in terms of investments, he has not said, and he continued to not answer the question around he is invested in a law firm that he gets money for when you are bringing in people for class action lawsuits. He has not disavowed himself from that. And so when you're also thinking about career service and what he can do, one of the things he can do is always slow everything down. And he can also sort of redirect in his own vision. And we are now in a situation, in an environment where if you do not comply, you might not have a job. And also, I'm curious, Daryl, like, would you have taken the fake bailout?
It's so weird, depending on where you are in your career. You're on the GS schedule, and it's like if I was getting ready to leave anyway to move into a different aspect of it, you're like, oh, this might the timing could be really cool. But it's like, what exactly does this mean? What am I signing on? So and there's, I think, with that and all these other executive orders and directives, there's just a whole lot of uncertainty. What exactly is it that they're offering? What exactly is it that they're directing us to do or not do? So, and you can, just being around the DC area, and you have neighbors who are federal employees. It's just there's tension in the air. I don't know anyone who is taking it, but I also know most of the folks I talk to are further established in their careers. They're closer to retirement than they are like taking a buyout. And that sort of thing. So I don't expect that, and the civil service unions and like the local congressional delegations have come out strongly against this sort of thing and sort of warning folks to like don't sign on this line, stand your ground essentially.
Like Senator Kane said, there's no authority to
Yeah.
actually provide a buyout payment amount. So I can't imagine many folks are going to
Yeah.
take advantage of this, so to speak. All I can say is my sister, who was a federal employee, she come back to work 5 days a week, March 1st. So is her husband. And I don't believe either one of them is going to take out this buyout. So
Yeah.
I doubt they get the 5 to 10% attrition that they expect.
And they constitutionally can't even fund the amount he says 8 months of severance and a buyout. That's not in the, that they cannot do that. They can only do
Yeah.
about $25,000. And I think it's really interesting, Senator Kane's comment, because where's Congress in all this, right? An executive order is also sort of like the president saying, you may have passed this law, but I'm going to do it the way that I want to do it. Here's my directive, which is different than faithfully executing the laws.
Right.
And so you're now seeing Trump in terms of, he's telling appropriations doesn't care what they do. He's telling all of these members of Congress who are in his party that what you say doesn't matter to me. And so it will be curious where the checks and balances starts to happen.
Yeah.
I think right now we're still in, let's see how it goes. We favor the president. But when it starts to get personal, people start to feel a little bit more defensive. And where's that check going to finally hit?
Yeah, when I was in CMS, it's there's the vision, there's the plan, and if that didn't really align with what's going on back home in the districts, the phones in our office started ringing.
In the Office of Legislation.
Office of
within CMS,
Legislation,
absolutely.
right?
Yep.
It's like, okay, like I understand, what you guys are trying to accomplish over there, but I understand that we need to do this as a department, but you hear this from the authorizing committees or even members of Congress who aren't on, finance or ways and means or energy and commerce. They still have a stake that when things don't go well, for Medicaid recipient or Medicare beneficiary, they're calling their congressional offices, who in turn pick up the phone and yell at someone like me.
Yeah, well, you're very yellable.
And no, I just
To be
sit there
candid.
and I take it like I can look at the rules and figure out what's what. So yeah.
Yeah, I did note that the governor of Louisiana, red state, governor is, I think, an ally of President Trump, and he said, we support, as you said, Daryl, we support what you're doing, but let's think about the impact on my state. So, and there's theory and there's practice.
Right.
So the theory has been put out there. The practice is a radically different thing. And as an attorney, Lauren, you mentioned, where do the checks come out? Obviously, the Dems are opposed, but they're in the minority. And the R's publicly okay right now, but that may change. But the courts have jumped in on a lot of these EOs. The federal funding freeze, there's 2 lawsuits on that already. And other EOs have been litigated as well. So the courts are getting involved, and we'll see how those courts rule. But
Yeah.
things are I tell you one thing, it's been a crazy week.
Yeah. It's only what week
Week
two?
Two,
Yeah.
Week 2.
Yeah.
so we're busy.
Yeah.
So that's why we had this podcast.
Yeah, but it's also funny because we are talking as if he has been confirmed. And
Yes, good point.
we, based on, oh my gosh, Senator Cassidy was about to lose his mind. We've been asking his questions. He looked so exasperated that he became a meme. And when you're starting to get that from people who actually practice medicine, I don't know where these numbers are going to land. It might be another 50-50 again, but you're automatically I'm going to assume that McConnell's going to vote no, based on RFK Jr.'s stances on vaccines, and he is a polio survivor.
Yep.
I don't know where Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski fit in, but they voted against the Secretary of Defense nomination. So they are also sort of flexing their muscle there. And so you have 3, if you do 4, that's when it gets tricky because, if it's 50-50, the vice president can break the tie. If it's 51, will that person be Cassidy? Will it be someone else? There's several doctors in the Senate. Are they going to get activated by this? And I truly don't know.
Yeah, and are you willing, as uncomfortable as they may or may not be with this particular nomination, are they willing to hang a loss on the board for President Trump? Are they willing to, here's week 2 and one of your major nominees goes down on the Senate floor? That is hard to overcome, and that is a tough vote. So I'd be really curious to see how that happens. But in the meantime, you've got these agencies. The rule cycle doesn't stop, right?
That's
Got to
right.
get their folks in place to do this, and how that all shakes out is we're sort of in this holding pattern. And unfortunately, under the current executive order, the folks over there are on this essentially gag order. So we're in this holding pattern.
Okay, so it sounds like TBD. The great thing is we're doing this every other 2 weeks. So we'll talk more about the confirmation hearings in a couple weeks and everything else we talked about, EOs and where they are. I'd like to thank you both for being here today. Very skibbity, and good day.
Thanks for joining us for Filibusters in Fine Print. This podcast was brought to you by AMGA. For more information about AMGA's advocacy efforts, visit amga.org/advocacy.